Kawhi came back, then everything changed. Kawhi Leonard had barely stepped back into Toronto before the entire NBA started whispering the same terrifying question. Did the Raptors just bring home a champion? Or did they inherit the biggest risk in basketball? Because this was supposed to feel like a celebration. This was supposed to be the return of the man who gave Toronto the one thing nobody could ever take away the 2019 championship. The miracle playoff run, the 4-bounce shot, the finals MVP, the memory of an entire country standing still while Kawhi Leonard turned the Raptors into kings. But this time, the story did not begin with a parade. It began with concern. Just days after the blockbuster trade sent Kawhi Leonard back to the Toronto Raptors, reports started circling that the team was already facing the one nightmare everyone feared from the moment the deal was announced: another physical setback, another question about his body, another reminder that with Kawhi, greatness and uncertainty always travel together. And that is what makes this trade so dangerous. The Raptors did not just acquire a former finals MVP. They acquired a 5-year-old legend with championship scars, a complicated injury history, and one of the most mysterious careers of this generation. When he is healthy, Kawhi is still one of the most terrifying two-way players alive. He can slow the game down, punish defenders in the mid-range, guard elite wings, and make playoff possessions feel like they belong to him. But when his body does not cooperate, everything changes. That is why the Clippers finally let go. After years of waiting, hoping, managing, resting, and rebuilding around him, Los Angeles looked at Kawhi's contract, his knee, his age, and his future and decided it was time to move on. That alone should make every Raptors fan pause. Because if the team that knew him best was not willing to commit long-term, why was Toronto willing to take the gamble? Maybe because Toronto remembers what happened the last time they gambled on Kawhi Leonard. In 2018, they gave up DeMar DeRozan, their franchise heart, for one uncertain season of Kawhi. People questioned it. Fans were emotional. Critics called it risky. And then Kawhi delivered the greatest season in Raptors history. Now, 8 years later, the same city is betting on the same man again. But this is not the same Kawhi. This version comes with more history, more mileage, more medical questions, and a darker cloud hanging over the deal. The emotion is real. The nostalgia is powerful. The basketball fit is fascinating. But behind every highlight, every welcome back message, every fan dreaming of another deep playoff run, there is one uncomfortable truth nobody can ignore. Toronto's entire dream depends on whether Kawhi Leonard's body can survive one more championship chase. And if it can, the Raptors may have just changed the Eastern Conference overnight. But if it cannot, this return could become one of the most painful what-if stories in NBA history. So, before we go deeper, let me know where you are watching from right now. Are you in Toronto, Los Angeles, or somewhere else watching this drama unfold? If you believe Kawhi can lead the Raptors back into championship contention, comment 1. If you think this trade is too risky and Toronto may regret it, comment 2. And if you want more NBA stories like this, make sure you subscribe, because this Kawhi Leonard return is only getting started. The trade that shocked the league. The moment the trade dropped, the NBA did not just react, it froze, because this was not a small move at the edge of the rotation. This was not a team adding a veteran for depth. This was Kawhi Leonard, one of the most important playoff players of the modern era, being sent back to the city where he became immortal. And Toronto did not get him for free. The Raptors gave up Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, valuable future first-round picks, a pick swap, and extra draft capital to make this happen. That kind of package tells you exactly how serious this front office believes the opportunity is. They were not shopping for nostalgia. They were not buying a jersey retirement moment. They were trying to raise the ceiling of the entire franchise. But here is where the deal becomes complicated. The Clippers did not move Kawhi Leonard because he suddenly forgot how to play basketball. When healthy, he was still producing at an elite level. He was still scoring efficiently. He was still controlling games in that quiet, ruthless way only Kawhi can. He was still the kind of player defenders hate seeing in a playoff series because he never looks rushed, never looks emotional, and never gives you the feeling that pressure bothers him. So if he was still that good, why would Los Angeles let him go? That is the question that should keep Raptors fans awake, because the Clippers knew the full story. They knew the training room conversations, they knew the daily management plan, they knew how many times the knee needed attention, how carefully his workload had to be handled, and how fragile a championship window becomes when your number one option cannot be guaranteed for the biggest moment. Los Angeles had already lived the dream version and the nightmare version of Kawhi Leonard. They saw the superstar. They also saw the absences. They saw the playoff dominance. They also saw the seasons interrupted by injury reports. They saw the promise of a championship contender. They also saw that promise disappear again and again before it could fully become real. So when the Clippers finally decided not to extend the relationship long term, it felt less like a basketball trade and more like a confession. They were telling the league that the risk had grown too large. They were telling everyone that even Kawhi's greatness might not be enough to outweigh the uncertainty around his body. And Toronto still said yes. That is what makes this move so fascinating. The Raptors looked at the same player, the same age, the same medical history, the same contract pressure, the same doubts, and believed there was still enough magic left to change everything. Maybe they are right. Maybe this is the rare gamble that only looks dangerous until it wins. Maybe Kawhi returns to Toronto, plays within a smarter system, stays fresh for the postseason, and gives the Raptors the one thing young teams are always searching for, a proven closer who has already stood on the final stage and walked away with the trophy. But maybe the Clippers saw the ending before everyone else did. And if they did, Toronto may have just paid a massive price to learn a lesson. Los Angeles already understood. The ghost of 2019. To understand why Toronto took this risk, you have to go back to the year that changed everything. Before that season, the Raptors were respected, but they were not feared. They won games, they made the playoffs, they had stars, they had culture, they had a fan base that believed with its whole heart. But every time the lights got brighter, something went wrong. The postseason kept becoming a wall Toronto could not break through. Then Kawhi Leonard arrived. At first, it felt uncomfortable. DeMar DeRozan was gone, and that hurt the city in a way numbers could not explain. DeMar had loved Toronto openly. He had carried the franchise emotionally. He had given fans loyalty in a league where loyalty often disappears. The second business gets involved. And the Raptors traded him for one uncertain year of Kawhi. Nobody knew if Kawhi wanted to stay. Nobody knew if his body was fully right. Nobody knew if the chemistry would work. Nobody knew if this quiet superstar from California would connect with a city that had already given its heart to someone else. Then the playoffs began, and everything changed. Kawhi Leonard did not just play well. He took control of Toronto's destiny. Possession by possession, series by series, he became the calm center of the storm. Against Philadelphia, he carried the Raptors through a brutal battle that came down to one final shot. The ball left his hands, bounced once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and an entire country held its breath before history finally dropped through the rim. That was not just a basket. That was a franchise being reborn. Then came Milwaukee. Giannis and the Bucks looked like they were ready to take the East, but Kawhi stood in the way. Toronto adjusted, fought, trusted, and survived. Then came Golden State, the dynasty, the defending giant, the team everyone had been chasing for years. And Kawhi finished the job. Finals MVP, NBA champion, Toronto legend forever. But the strangest part of that story is how quickly it ended. The parade came, the celebration exploded, the city begged him to stay. Fans believed maybe, just maybe, winning had changed everything. Then Kawhi left. He chose Los Angeles. He chose the Clippers. He chose a different future. And Toronto was left with the most complicated kind of love. Gratitude mixed with heartbreak. Pride mixed with rejection. A championship banner mixed with the question of what could have happened if he had stayed. That is why this return feels so powerful. Because Kawhi is not just another former star coming back. He is the man who gave Toronto its greatest basketball memory and then walked away before the city was ready to let go. Now he is back, older, more fragile, more complicated, but still connected to the one season Raptors fans will never forget. And that is why this trade is not only about basketball, it is about unfinished business. Why Toronto still wants to believe. Toronto does not love Kawhi Leonard the way most cities love a former star. This is different because he did not spend 10 years there. He did not grow from a rookie into a legend in that uniform. He did not become the face of the franchise through loyalty, speeches, or long-term promises. Kawhi's time in Toronto was short. Almost impossibly short. 1 season. But sometimes 1 season is enough to change everything. That is why Raptors fans can still feel conflicted and grateful at the same time. They remember that he left. They remember how close the city felt to convincing him to stay. They remember the disappointment when he chose the Clippers. But they also remember the championship. They remember the shot. They remember the calm. They remember the feeling of watching their team finally stand above the entire league. That kind of memory does not fade. So when news broke that Kawhi was coming back, it was not just a roster move. It was emotional. It pulled fans back into a moment they thought could never return. Suddenly, the old highlights meant something again. The championship run was not just history anymore. It became the first chapter of a story that might still have a second act, and that is dangerous. Nostalgia can make a fan base believe in things logic would normally question. It can make a city look past age. It can make people soften the injury concerns. It can make a front office convince itself that what happened once can happen again, even if the circumstances are completely different. But Toronto's belief is not only emotional, there is a basketball reason this makes sense. The Raptors have a young, athletic, defensive-minded core. They have players who can run, switch, compete, and absorb tough matchups. They do not need Kawhi to carry every single possession from November to April. They need him to be available when the season becomes serious. They need him to be the closer, the decision maker, the playoff adult in the room, the player who can walk into a hostile arena and make the game slow down. That is still Kawhi's greatest gift. He has never needed to be loud to be powerful. He does not sell emotion. He does not chase drama with his voice. His game speaks in stops, mid-range jumpers, strong hands, quiet footwork, and playoff possessions that feel heavier when he touches the ball. Toronto knows that version of Kawhi. They have seen it win everything. And that is why the city wants to believe again, even with every warning sign flashing. The knee is a concern, the age is real, the contract is risky, the investigation in the background adds another layer of uncertainty. But belief is not always built on perfect logic. Sometimes, belief is built on memory. And Toronto's memory of Kawhi Leonard is still covered in champagne, the knee that could decide everything. There is one thing standing between the Raptors and the dream. Kawhi Leonard's right knee, that is the uncomfortable truth behind this entire return. Toronto can celebrate the comeback, the fans can remember 2019, and the front office can talk about championship upside. But none of it matters if Kawhi's body cannot survive another long season. Because with Kawhi, the question has never been talent. When healthy, he is still one of the most dangerous two-way players alive. He can score in isolation, control the mid-range, defend elite wings, and turn playoff pressure into something calm and manageable. He has already proven he can be the best player on a championship team. But his injury history changes everything. The quad issue in San Antonio, the ACL tear in Los Angeles, the meniscus injury, the knee inflammation, the missed games, the careful workload management, the long stretches where teams had to build their plans around whether Kawhi could even be available. That is the risk Toronto accepted. The Raptors cannot treat him like a normal superstar. They cannot expect him to carry every regular season game or chase meaningless minutes in December. They have to protect him, pace him, and make sure the real goal is not opening night, it is the playoffs. But that will not be easy. Every missed game will become a headline. Every slow movement will become a clip. Every absence will restart the debate. Did Toronto make a brilliant move, or did they ignore the warning sign? That is the price of bringing Kawhi Leonard back. If the knee holds up, Toronto becomes dangerous immediately. If it does not, the entire dream could collapse before it ever reaches the postseason. And that is why this trade is not just about basketball. It is about trust. Trusting Kawhi's talent, trusting Toronto's medical plan, trusting that one of the most unpredictable bodies in the NBA can stay strong long enough for one final championship chase. Why the Clippers finally let go? The Clippers did not move Kawhi Leonard because he forgot how to play. They moved him because they had seen the full cost of waiting. For years, Los Angeles built everything around the idea that Kawhi and Paul George could deliver a championship. The Clippers had the stars, the market, the ambition, and the pressure. On paper, it looked like a title formula, but reality was much harsher. Kawhi was brilliant when available, but availability became the problem. The Clippers kept waiting for the perfect postseason. They kept hoping his body would cooperate at the right time. They kept managing injuries, adjusting timelines, and answering the same questions every year. And the championship never came. That is what makes this trade so revealing. Los Angeles knew Kawhi better than anyone. They knew the daily concerns. They knew the medical history. They knew how carefully he had to be managed, so when they refused to fully commit long-term, it sent a loud message to the rest of the league. The Clippers still respected Kawhi, but they no longer trusted the risk. That should worry Toronto, because the team that lived through the Kawhi experiment finally decided it was time to walk away. Still, this could become painful for Los Angeles. If Kawhi stays healthy in Toronto and leads the Raptors into a deep playoff run, every Clippers fan will ask the same question. Did they give up too soon? That is the danger of trading a legend. Sometimes you move on because the risk is real. But sometimes the player you gave up has one last great chapter left. And now Toronto is betting that Kawhi's final chapter will happen in the same city where his greatest one began. The shadow behind the celebration. Kawhi's knee is not the only thing following him back to Toronto. There is also the unresolved cloud from his Clippers era. Reports and league scrutiny have raised questions about an alleged financial arrangement involving Kawhi, the Clippers, and an outside company connected to business partnerships. The NBA has been looking into whether salary cap rules may have been violated through endorsement money or improper benefits. For Toronto, that creates an awkward situation. The Raptors did not create this issue. Their fans had nothing to do with it. But when they traded for Kawhi, they also inherited the noise surrounding it. That means this comeback is not clean and simple. On the court, Toronto wants to talk about defense, playoff matchups, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, and Kawhi's ability to close games. But off the court, the questions remain in the background. Could the investigation lead to penalties? Could it affect Kawhi's reputation? Could it bring unwanted attention during the season? Nobody knows yet. And with Kawhi, silence only makes the mystery feel bigger. He has never been the type of superstar to explain every detail publicly. He does not chase cameras. He does not feed the media. He lets the game speak for him. But in today's NBA, silence does not stop speculation. That is why Toronto has to stay disciplined. They must control what they can control. Kawhi's health, his role, the locker room, and the team's focus. They cannot allow outside noise to become louder than the mission, because this season already has enough pressure. A returning legend, a risky contract, a fragile knee, a young roster, a fan base dreaming of 2019 all over again. The Raptors did not just trade for talent. They traded for a storm. Why Toronto thinks this can work? For all the risk, there is one reason Toronto made this move. The basketball fit is real. The Raptors are not bringing Kawhi Leonard into a broken roster. This is not a desperate team hoping an old superstar can save everything alone. Toronto already has a foundation. They have youth, defense, athleticism, and a core that looks ready to compete. That is why the trade is so interesting. Scotty Barnes is still there. RJ Barrett is still there. Emmanuel Quickley is still there. The young defensive pieces are still there. Toronto did not destroy its identity to get Kawhi back. They added him to it. That is the key. Kawhi does not need to carry every possession like he did in 2019. He does not need to play hero every night. He can pick his spots, conserve energy, and become the closer when the game slows down. That is where he still matters most. Young teams often struggle in the playoffs because the easy points disappear. Transition gets limited, defenses adjust, every weakness gets exposed. In those moments, teams need someone who can create a good shot under pressure. Kawhi has done that at the highest level. He brings calm. He brings playoff experience. He brings championship authority. And if his body holds up, he gives Toronto something most young teams do not have: a proven number one option when the game becomes serious. Defensively, the ceiling is even more exciting. Kawhi next to long, athletic, switchable players could make the Raptors one of the toughest teams to attack in the East. But the plan only works if Toronto stays smart. They must protect him. They must manage his minutes. They must think long term, because the goal is not to win headlines in November. The goal is to have Kawhi Leonard healthy when the playoffs begin. If that happens, the Raptors are not just a nice story. They are a real threat. The three possible endings. This story has three possible endings. The first is the dream. Kawhi stays healthy, Toronto manages him perfectly, and the Raptors become a dangerous playoff team. The young core grows around him. Scotty Barnes gets more space. RJ Barrett attacks with less pressure. Emmanuel Quickley controls the pace. And when the game gets tight, Kawhi becomes the closer Toronto needed. That ending would feel like destiny. The second ending is the tease. Kawhi plays well, but his body never fully cooperates. He gives Toronto flashes of greatness, but the missed games pile up. The Raptors look dangerous one week and uncertain the next. Fans believe, doubt, then believe again. That might be the most painful outcome, because it would not feel like failure right away. It would feel like waiting for Kawhi to get healthy, waiting for the rotation to settle, waiting for the playoffs, waiting for one more version of the player who once carried Toronto to the top. The third ending is the nightmare. The knee becomes the story. The off-court noise grows louder. The trade package starts looking too expensive. Brandon Ingram's production elsewhere gets compared to Kawhi's availability. Every Raptors loss becomes a debate about whether the front office chased the past instead of protecting the future. That is the danger. Toronto could have stayed patient. They could have kept building slowly. They could have waited for a safer star. Instead, they chose the swing. And maybe that is exactly what great franchises do, because championships are rarely won by playing scared. The Raptors know that better than anyone. Their greatest moment came from taking a risk on Kawhi Leonard once before. Now they are doing it again. The only question is whether history will repeat itself or punish them for believing too much. Legacy, risk, and the final lesson. In the end, Kawhi Leonard's return to Toronto is bigger than one trade. It is about legacy, risk, loyalty, memory, and the price of chasing greatness one more time. Toronto did not need Kawhi for 10 years to make him unforgettable. One season was enough. One playoff run was enough. One championship was enough. He gave the Raptors their greatest basketball moment, then left before the city was ready to say goodbye. Now he is back. But this is not the same Kawhi. He is older, more fragile, and carrying years of physical battles. this is not the beginning of his prime. This is the final act of one of the most complicated superstar careers in NBA history. If he leads Toronto on another deep run, his legacy changes forever. He will not just be the man who won one title and disappeared. He will become the champion who came back, trusted the city again, and tried to finish the story the right way. But if the injuries return, Toronto will have to live with the consequences of chasing a memory. That is the lesson. Nostalgia can inspire a franchise, but it cannot protect a season. Championships are not won by emotion alone. They require health, timing, discipline, chemistry, and honesty. Still, you cannot blame Toronto for taking the chance. The Raptors know that safe decisions do not always create legendary moments. Their 2019 title came from a gamble. They traded comfort for possibility, and it changed the franchise forever. Now they are betting again. But this time, they must remember something important. Kawhi Leonard is not just an asset, not just a contract, not just a highlight reel. He is a player whose body has carried years of pressure, pain, rehab, and expectation. Fans should respect that. Injuries should never become jokes. Athletes are human beings, not machines. So whether this comeback becomes a fairy tale or a warning, Kawhi's place in Toronto history is already secure. The only question now is whether he has one more chapter left. If you believe Kawhi can give Toronto one last magical playoff run, comment 1. If you think the Raptors took too big of a risk, comment 2. Like the video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe to the channel for more NBA stories about trades, drama, legacy, and the decisions that change the league forever.